Diamonds are forever.
I'm doing a little something different with this episode of the web series, Daimon Possessed, as I'm calling it. I'm interviewing my friend Johnathan Stewart, who is well, we'll get to why he's here. But Johnathan, if you don't mind, give my listeners the top of the Wikipedia page as far as who you are.
Sure. I'm a freelance writer and meditation coach who lives in Montreal. Outside of that, I'm bivocational clergy for the Apostolic Johannite Church. I'm a deacon in that community. It's a Gnostic and esoteric church. And I've had a long-term interest in the esoteric and in Gnosticism. And I have a podcast that is legally required for, middle-aged men. And it's going to be a law soon, folks. It's called Talk Gnosis. I shouldn't say it's mine. It's run by the Gnostic Wisdom Network. We got a lot of people who work on it, and our other shows that are coming up. It's been running for almost a decade now. So we have hundreds of shows, and it's mostly about Gnosticism, but also about like esoterica and mystical religion and contemplative religion in general. So we kind of veer between sort of a more expansive view and a more expansive episodes about stuff that might be perhaps more mystical or be tangentially connected. And then we have some real hardcore, hey, you're interested in Gnosticism, we're going to go deep with it with some practitioners or with some scholars. So yeah, let's Talk Gnosis. Check it out on YouTube. I called a podcast. It actually started as a YouTube show. It's primarily a YouTube show, and then we ripped the audio. Talk Gnosis, you can find it there. You can find it on the podcatcher of your choice, or go to gnosticwisdom.net. YouTube's your best bet to find it.
And running for 10 years. Have you been involved with it for 10 years?
I haven't, but I've been involved with it for a while now. So since around 2014, 2015, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been, it's been some time. And then I was behind the scenes and occasionally on camera. Now I'm on camera a lot. And of course, on that podcast video series, whatever you want to call it, we've had Patch on. So make sure you check out that episode.
Yeah, we may talk about it at some point. I did something in that episode. I said something that I have agonized over ever since, and it's kind of related to what we're talking about here. So maybe we'll get to that. One thing I want to call out, and I've always wanted to ask you this and these two questions related to it. In your Twitter bio, you mentioned that you at one time were an editor for Playboy.
Yes.
That is significant to me because one of my heroes, Robert Anton Wilson, was also an editor for Playboy. And my question is that place haunted by him? Like, do you see his fingerprints as being a part of that? Are they everywhere if you know where to look? Or has his spirit been exorcised from that corporation?
I gotta say it's mostly gone. And I keep that in my bio because it's fun. And I think there's something fun about going from having a religious studies background and working on Playboy. I work for Playboy.com. So for the website, they very briefly had an office, an outpost here in Montreal. Okay. So when I was there, I was able to sneak in a few esoteric articles. I'll send them over to you. So I have one on the OTO because of conspiracy theories at that time. JC was in the OTO. And I have one on sex magic. So there we're getting a little raw, if you excuse the pun. But besides that, his spirit is pretty gone, right? And I think it's been gone for a long time. And of course, he's a favorite of mine as well. So that's another reason why I keep that in the bio. So
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
You are my go-to resource for all things Gnostic and Gnosticism. And so the question I want us to start with, what is there a connection between the daemon that I talk about and Gnosticism? Do they exist between the same bumpers, as it were?
Nope. Okay, bye. Guess the interview's over.
Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm being facetious. I would say that there's a lot of connections. So
okay, good.
Because the Gnostics, they're very involved with the cultures around them, right? They're not in isolation. They're particularly renowned for being syncretic, for taking pieces of mythology, for taking chunks and influences from a wide range of the surrounding cultures and shaking it all up into a cohesive system, right? So you keep saying daemon, you're referencing that Greek idea, right? Like Socrates is daemon, right? So the Gnostics are reading Socrates, they're familiar with this idea of a daemon, right? And you have outside of specifically the Greek culture, Hellenistic culture, although really talking about what Hellenistic culture is a whole other rant, is you have similar ideas as well, right? A guardian spirit or a personal ka or ba in Egypt, right? So obviously, like these ideas are all around them, and then you also have Judeo-Christian ideas about a personal guardian angel, right? So the Gnostics are going to be drawing from all these cultural sources. So besides that, yes, I would say that an idea like the personal daemon plays a wide and very important role in many Gnostic systems. Now, I'm going to put lots of asterisks on here, right? Because Gnosticism was and is a very diverse phenomenon. In the first couple centuries of the Common Era, you have a wide range of Gnostic and Gnostic-y groups. It's a family of traditions, and they have some beliefs that are quite similar to each other, and then they have some beliefs that are quite different from each other. Okay. But basically, yes, in many Gnostic systems, many Gnostic groups, an idea like the daemon or an idea that is daemon, an idea like the holy guardian angel is very important. So we'll talk about one of the largest Gnostic groups, which even has subgroups within it, called the Valentinians, right? Named after their founder, Valentinus. For them, they had a mysterious ritual called the Bridal Chamber. And we don't have it written down. Maybe it was never written down, but we have lots of speculation about what it was, and different theories about what the actual ritual consisted of. However, it was very important for the Valentinian system. It was sort of the capital THE ritual, and they seem to believe that it led to some sort of radical change. Some sort of enlightenment, right? So this bridal chamber, as you can guess by the name, seems to be a ritual that would invoke and fuse you with your daemon, right? In using symbolism of a marriage, right? Two becoming one. Which I'm sure for many of us who, two people becoming one flesh, for any of us who have been to a Christian wedding, some of this language will sound familiar, right? So for the Valentinians, they seem to believe that there's an element of us that is a higher self that didn't fall into matter, that is angelically united with the divine, okay? And of course, there's all sorts of thinking about what that means and what that is, but it works quite well with Valentinian theology and with Gnostic theology, which often sees as sort of, as above, so below, but everything in these sort of dualistic splits. So for instance, you hear a lot about an entity called Sophia, wisdom, in Gnosticism, and in some systems, and in the Valentinian system, she has a fallen lower aspect and a higher aspect, which is ascendant, right? So, I'd say one way of thinking about this actually is this is not what the Valentinians would have said, I'm sure, but it's what I think of this duplicate idea is the wholeness, divinity is outside of time, right? So actually, your angelic double is you once you have become completely reconciled with the divine, because that process happens within time, then it takes place outside of time. So there's an aspect of you outside of time, and that's what you're uniting with. Or perhaps the Valentinians just would have said, you have an angelic double that was created, that has elements similar to you, that is there to help you, become enlightened, to ascend, to be able to exist in matter, right? And then you have to become united with this divine aspect, this divine double of yourself.
I have made a strong connection between this idea and the Jungian self. And when you talk about that marriage, that smacks of alchemy and the alchemical marriage. And when you talk about the double existing outside of time, I know there are lots of readings of Jung, and it's easy to kind of see what you want to see in him. He's kind of like a Rorschach test a little bit. If you're leaning mystical, you're going to see the mystical stuff. But my reading is that he kind of presents the self as existing outside of time somewhat, and trying to pull you towards wholeness, trying to pull you towards individuation. And so that's become, and I realize this is my, I try to push down this part of myself, but it's so strongly inbred, is my rationalist Western self, where I was like, well, Jung thought of himself as a scientist, and if he got there, then that's the safest way for me to think of it. If I want to talk about this online, on YouTube, on videos, I need to be able to back it up with some kind of science, which obviously the science is over my head, but I can point to Jung and say, well, it wasn't over his. But to me, those all, like, they seem like three different names for the same concept, and that's kind of how you started the Egyptian Ka, and the Sufis and the Kabbalists. They all had their versions of this thing, and it seems to be one of those things that if you leave people alone long enough, they're going to get there to this idea, whether it's the Gnostics or the Egyptians or Jung. And so it feels like it's one of those ideas that wants to emerge, that wants to present itself no matter where you are. I know you're a big fan of Jung yourself. Does that stuff kind of, do you see the clear, is it a clear, are there a line between what you're discussing and how you think about the Jungian self?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm completely simpatico with you on that. And I think it's good, we're two guys who are gonna, you hear this a lot on my talk show, we're all often kind of fall back onto psychological,
Sure.
materialistic, which is quite a strange thing to do, right? I'm actually trying to get out of the hobby of it. Out of the habit of it.
Yeah.
So and just be like, hey, it's all oogie boogie. I don't know. But that said, yes, I think that that what Jung is talking about is the same thing as these other ideas, and again, for it not being that weird, right? We all, just like a lot of this stuff, right, is people have experiences of their higher self. You don't have to do magical rituals and become a Gnostic or a Jungian, right? Of course, doing all these things or other things like it allow you to cultivate that connection and hopefully allow it to blossom. But we all have experiences of being our higher selves, right? So it's very natural, it's very normal, it's very human. It makes sense that we had mythologized it. But and sometimes that there can be a danger, and I think I'm a big Jung fan. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, and some of their critics, they do have a point about how sometimes them and people in their schools and some of their followers, it took lots of mythology and kind of retold it in a simplified way to make stronger connections. Sure. Right?
Yeah.
So now that we're a little bit more sophisticated and have in this regard and actually have more access to this material, and anthropological and folkloric and studies of mythology, we can be more aware of that, right? But that said, so what I'm trying to say is, there's all these things across all sorts of different cultures that look like the Daimon experience, and when we get into doing stuff like that, perhaps we have to be a little bit more careful, right? To not flatten all of these concepts from many different cultures. But I'm going to contradict myself and say, yeah, they're all the same thing in this case.
That was just a small snippet of my conversation with Johnathan. He is a treasure trove
information. And rather than just point the fire hose at your mouth and expect you to take it all in, I'm going to release it in pieces over time, partly because I've kind of committed to doing one of these a day for a while until my inspiration leaves me. So holding a little bit back for the future seems like a good idea. But I can't thank Johnathan enough for his insight and the information that he provided in this episode of the web series. Keep your eye open for more and go check out Talk Gnosis. It is incredible. You'll love it.